Hello, and welcome to Speak English with Olly. Today, we will explore one of the most shocking and famous criminal cases in American history, the Manson family cult and crime. This story is slow, detailed, and easy to follow. Listening to this episode can help you understand English better, learn new words, and practice your listening skills. We will travel back to 1960s California, meet Charles Manson and his followers, and learn about the crimes that shocked the world. So, sit back, relax, and let us begin the story of the Manson family. Charles Manson was born in 1934. He had a very difficult childhood. His mother left him often, and he spent time in reform schools and prisons. As a young man, he learned to manipulate people and became very charismatic, meaning he could attract and control others. In the late 1960s, Manson moved to California, where young people were searching for freedom, love, and community. He gathered a group of followers, mostly young men and women, who believed in his ideas. This group became known as the Manson family. Manson had strange beliefs. He thought a race war was coming and that he and his followers would be leaders of the new world. He also believed that music and media messages could inspire people to follow him. Many followers were afraid of him but also loyal because he promised them love and protection. The family lived together on a ranch near Los Angeles. They shared food, money, and tasks. Manson controlled almost every part of their life, from what they ate to what they believed. He often used drugs to keep the members loyal and obedient. The world outside did not know much about Manson at first. He seemed like a strange, quiet man living in California. But inside the ranch, he was preparing his followers for something dangerous and shocking. The story of the Manson family is not only about the crimes they committed. It is also about control, manipulation, and fear, and how one man could influence a group of people to commit terrible acts. By 1969, Charles Manson's influence over his followers had grown very strong. He gave them instructions and planned crimes. His goal was to create fear and chaos in California. On the night of August 8, 1969, the first Manson family murders took place. Two women, Sharon Tate and Jay Sebring, were at home in Los Angeles. Sharon Tate was an actress and very popular at the time. She was also pregnant. The killers entered the house quietly. They attacked the people inside with knives. Sharon and Jay, along with two other victims, Abigail Folger and Wojciech Frykowski, were killed. The scene was shocking. The house was full of violence, and messages were written on the walls. The Manson family wanted the murders to look like a racial crime, to start the race war that Manson had imagined. They left strange words written in blood. This caused fear across Los Angeles. People were terrified to go out at night. The next day, the police discovered the bodies. The media quickly reported the story. Everyone was shocked that such a terrible crime had happened in a quiet neighborhood. The murders seemed senseless and horrifying. Charles Manson was not at the scene, but he had planned it. His followers carried out his orders. This showed how dangerous Manson's control over the family had become. The murders of Sharon Tate and the others marked the beginning of a series of crimes by the Manson family. The public and police now knew that a cult in California was capable of extreme violence. After the shocking murders of Sharon Tate and her friends, Charles Manson continued to control his followers and plan more crimes. He wanted to create fear and chaos, and he believed that violence could help him start a race war, which he called Helter Skelter. On the night of August 10, 1969, Manson sent some of his followers to commit more murders. This time, the victims were Leno and Rosemary LaBianca, a wealthy couple in Los Angeles. Manson went with them to the house but did not participate in the killing. His followers carried out the attack. The murders were brutal. The victims were killed with knives, and messages were left on the walls in blood, similar to the first murders. These messages were meant to confuse the police and scare the public. Manson's power over the family was clear. He convinced his followers that they would gain power and survive a coming war if they obeyed him. Many of the members were young, confused, or searching for love and acceptance, and Manson used this to control them completely. The media quickly reported the LaBianca murders. People were terrified that such violence could happen anywhere. Fear spread across Los Angeles and California. The police realized that Manson's group was not just dangerous. They were organized, committed, and unpredictable. The investigation began to focus on Manson and his followers. Police discovered the ranch where the family lived. They found evidence of the murders, weapons, and signs of cult activity. Some members of the family were arrested for minor crimes, and investigators began to learn how Manson controlled his followers through fear, drugs, and manipulation. The story of the Manson family is not only about the murders. It is also about how one man could influence and control people to commit terrible acts. The combination of fear, belief, and obedience shows how dangerous a cult can be when led by someone like Charles Manson. These crimes shocked the world and left a lasting impression on American history and culture. People realized that even in bright, sunny California, there could be darkness and terror hidden in quiet neighborhoods. After the murders of Sharon Tate, Jay Sebring, and the LaBiancas, the police worked hard to find the killers. They searched the Manson family's ranch, interviewed witnesses, and collected evidence. The case quickly became one of the most famous criminal investigations in the United States. Police discovered that the family had lived on a ranch near Los Angeles. The investigators saw that Charles Manson had a strong influence over his followers. He controlled what they ate, what they wore, and even what they believed. Some family members were afraid of Manson, while others followed him because they wanted love, acceptance, or purpose. The investigation showed how dangerous a cult leader could be. Manson had convinced his followers to commit murder for him, believing that it would bring about the helter-skelter race war. Police learned that Manson had planned the murders carefully and used fear and manipulation to control his followers. Over the next months, the police arrested several family members. Some were charged with minor crimes at first, like theft or drug use, but investigators soon connected them to the murders. The authorities also collected weapons, letters, and evidence from the ranch, which linked the family to the killings. The public was shocked. People could not believe that a group of young people, living in California during a time of freedom and peace, could be responsible for such violent acts. Newspapers and television programs reported daily on the murders and the investigation. The world began to understand the danger of the Manson family and the power of Charles Manson himself. Manson, however, was not yet caught. He continued to move between safe places, sometimes hiding at other properties or with followers who were not yet arrested. The police worked tirelessly to track him down. They understood that Manson was dangerous and unpredictable, and capturing him was urgent to prevent further violence. The investigation also revealed the psychological control Manson had over his followers. He used drugs, fear, and promises of a new world to make them obey him completely. This control explained why his followers were willing to commit murder, even when they were young or inexperienced. The arrest of the family members marked the beginning of a long trial, which would show the world the full story of Charles Manson, his manipulation, and the terrible crimes committed by the cult. After the arrests, Charles Manson and several members of his family went to trial. The trial began in 1970 and quickly became one of the most famous court cases in the United States. People all over the country were watching the news. During the trial, the police and prosecutors explained how Manson had planned the murders. They showed that he had influenced his followers to kill Sharon Tate, her friends, and the LaBiancas. Evidence included weapons, letters, and testimony from former family members who had left the cult. Manson himself did not act like a normal defendant. He often smiled, sang songs, or made strange statements in court. Sometimes he even tried to control the courtroom by giving orders to his followers. This behavior shocked the public and made him appear even more dangerous and unpredictable. The prosecution showed that Manson's followers were completely loyal to him. They explained that many were young and vulnerable, and Manson had used fear, drugs, and promises of a new world to make them obey his orders. The jury saw how one man could control a group of people to commit terrible crimes. The trial lasted for many months. The families of the victims were present, often facing emotional moments as they listened to the details of the murders. The media covered every detail, and people across the country were horrified by the story. During the trial, Manson and his followers were found guilty of multiple murders. They were sentenced to death, although the sentence was later changed to life in prison when California temporarily ended the death penalty. The trial showed the world how dangerous cults can be and how one person's control over others can lead to terrible acts. It also revealed the full extent of Charles Manson's manipulation, showing that the real crime was not only the murders but also the control and fear he created among his followers. After the trial, Charles Manson and several of his followers went to prison. Manson spent the rest of his life behind bars, while some of his followers were also sentenced to life in prison. He became famous worldwide, not only for the murders but also for his strange behavior and ideas. Even in prison, Manson remained dangerous and manipulative. He gave interviews, made statements to the media, and continued to spread his ideas to a few visitors. He tried to maintain the image of a cult leader, even when separated from his followers. The Manson family, however, gradually disbanded. Some followers left the cult before the murders, others were arrested, and some stayed in prison for life. People studied their behavior to understand how Manson could control them. Experts learned that his influence came from a mix of charisma, fear, and drugs. The story of the Manson family had a lasting effect on American culture. Movies, books, and television shows explored the murders and the cult. People became more aware of the danger of cults and the way leaders can manipulate vulnerable people. The murders also changed how people viewed safety in California. Many were shocked that such crimes could happen in wealthy neighborhoods and among famous people. The Tate murders, in particular, showed that fame and wealth do not protect people from danger. Even decades later, Charles Manson's name is still remembered. The crimes, the trial, and the cult's influence are often studied in psychology, criminology, and history classes. The story reminds the world that one person's control over others can lead to terrible consequences. The Manson family murders are not only a story of violence, but also a story of fear, manipulation, and tragedy. Their legacy remains a warning about the power of cult leaders and the danger of blindly following someone. After the Manson family murders, the story of Charles Manson and his followers became famous worldwide. Newspapers, magazines, and television programs reported every detail of the crimes, the trial, and the cult. People were both horrified and fascinated. The media showed how Manson could control a group of people to commit terrible acts. They described the murders in detail, explained his strange beliefs, and reported on the family's lifestyle on the ranch. People were shocked that a cult could exist so close to cities like Los Angeles. The public fear was strong. People worried about strangers, cults, and unusual groups. Parents warned their children, and communities became more alert. The murders of Sharon Tate and the LaBiancas remained in people's minds for years, showing how one person's influence could cause great harm. The story also fascinated psychologists and criminologists who studied Manson and his followers. They tried to understand how he could convince people to commit murder. They learned about charisma, manipulation, fear, and drugs, and how these tools allowed Manson to control others completely. Even decades later, the Manson family story continues to appear in movies, documentaries, and books. People are still curious about Manson's ideas, his control over the family, and the horrible crimes they committed. The case remains a symbol of cult violence and manipulation. The story is not only about the murders themselves. It is also about the danger of blind loyalty, the power of a leader over followers, and how easily fear can spread through a community. The legacy of the Manson family is clear. It is a story of fear, control, and tragedy, showing the consequences of manipulation and obedience. Charles Manson spent the rest of his life in prison. He was kept in maximum security facilities and remained a dangerous and unpredictable figure. Over the years, he gave interviews and tried to communicate with the outside world, but he never regained control over followers in the same way he had at the ranch. Some of the Manson family members stayed in prison for life, while others were released after many years. A few tried to live normal lives, but they were always connected to the crimes in the public's mind. Society remembered them as part of the dangerous cult led by Manson. Even in later years, Manson continued to influence media and popular culture. Books, documentaries, movies, and news articles kept his story alive. Psychologists, historians, and criminologists studied him to understand how a cult leader could control and manipulate young people. The Manson family crimes left a lasting mark on American society. They changed how people thought about cults, safety, and blind obedience. Parents warned children about the dangers of following strangers or joining groups without questioning authority. Communities became more aware of how easily fear and manipulation can spread. Manson's influence also became a symbol in popular culture. Songs, movies, and TV shows often referenced him or the family to show the danger of charismatic leaders and extreme loyalty. The name Manson became known worldwide, representing not just the murders, but manipulation, fear, and cult power. Although decades have passed, the story of Charles Manson and the family continues to fascinate and warn. People still study the case to understand how one person's influence can lead to terrible consequences and change the lives of many. After the trial and the sentencing, Charles Manson and several of his followers spent the rest of their lives in prison. Manson died in 2017, still famous for the crimes he orchestrated and the control he had over his followers. Some of the family members remained in prison for life, while a few were eventually released, though their lives were always affected by their past. The story of the Manson family left a lasting impact on society. It showed how a charismatic leader could manipulate and control people, even young, otherwise normal individuals, to commit terrible acts. It also revealed the danger of blind loyalty and the power of fear in shaping human behavior. The crimes shocked the world, and the media coverage made Manson and his followers household names. Movies, books, documentaries, and news reports continue to explore the murders, the cult, and Manson's influence. Psychologists, criminologists, and historians study the case to understand how such control and manipulation can happen. The story is a warning for the future. It reminds us to think critically, question authority, and be aware of the influence others can have over us. The Manson family murders were not only a tragedy for the victims and their families, but also a lesson about human behavior, manipulation, and fear. The story of the Manson family is one of fear, manipulation, and tragedy. Charles Manson and his followers created a shadow over California in the late 1960s, showing how dangerous a cult can be. Even decades later, the story continues to fascinate people around the world. It reminds us of the consequences of blind obedience and the importance of critical thinking and personal responsibility. And so, the story of the Manson family remains a cautionary tale, a chapter in history that will never be forgotten. Thank you for watching this episode of Speak English with Olly. Remember, learning from history helps us stay aware, think carefully, and make better choices. If you enjoyed this episode, you can practice your English by listening again and learning new words from the story. Stay curious, stay safe, and see you in the next episode.